Hi, welcome to Gridiron Gurus for the Kennebec Journal and Morning Sentinel. I'm Travis Lazarczyk, alongside, as always, my colleague Drew Bonifant. Drew, how you doing? It's playoff time.
Doing pretty well, getting excited. How are you?
Yeah, I am good. Our guest this week is Gardiner head coach Joe White. Coach, thanks for being here.
Thanks.
You guys have a game coming up against Morse on Friday night.
We do. Big game for us, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many teams are playing a team for the fourth time in 2 years. You guys had them in the playoffs last year, had them in the first round playoffs last year, first round playoffs this year, season opener both these years. What's just the familiarity like with you guys, and what's it like getting ready to play a team for fourth time in 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of preparation or change for it necessarily. Both running teams, and we're very fortunate to be playing them. Drawing a third seed with a 3-5 record, would make some people say, but again, I think we're fortunate to be in a situation where we won some games early on. Heel points have kept us afloat once again, and so eerily similar setup to what happened last year, and so we're gonna have to play real hard. They have an outstanding running back. He's real tough to bring down, and so we're going to have to tackle and make plays. So it'll be good to see him again.
I mean, you say some teams might be wondering how a 3-5 team is a third seed, but this was pretty much the formula, like you were saying, from last year. So I mean, this team proved that even with that record, it could do some damage. And when you look at the way this is starting with another seed like this against a Morse team like this, can you turn that into the team kind of thinking like, hey, this is starting to feel like last year at all? Like, can you kind of get those sorts of feelings going with the players?
Hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different team and a different set of circumstances in that we were really riding some momentum going into the playoffs, having won a couple of games in a row. And so this year is a little bit different. We've been on a skid, and they just have to get up for it, because it's now a do-or-die situation, and they're going to have to play 4 quarters hard if they want to be playing the following week. And so,
yeah, I mean, with the struggles the offense has had, I mean, you've played some tough teams too.
Sure.
with Coney, which has been doing that to everybody, in Levitt, which is, with the exception of the Freiburg game, been running through its competition.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, when you look at the way the offense has been going, do you look at this game and say, okay, we're going to need to win this with our defense? This is going to need to be a low-scoring game, or do you still feel like the offense is kind of on the verge of figuring some things out and being able to be a team that can get into the 20s or mid-20s in points?
Yeah, I think it's a confidence piece. I don't think we can rely on our defense like we have, because that's a long time for those guys to be on the field.
Sure.
We've gone into halftime against some good teams, down 7-0, 14-0, but if they're on the field for most of the second half, they get worn down. So it's going to be a matter of execution. We're not doing anything fancy, never have really. But I think going into this week, we have to look at it like, we've played well against them before, and it may give us an opportunity to get some things clicking early and keep the offense out there.
Few teams were hit as hard by injuries as you guys this year. Are you guys getting healthy now? Getting more people ready to go tomorrow night?
We still got a couple of the big guys in a cast, and
Sure.
them's the breaks, and so you gotta try to find ways to win and get other guys to step up, hopefully in roles that are going to make big plays for you, because our 2 big playmakers are, it's unfortunate, but that's just how it goes.
Next
sometimes.
man up.
That's the next man up.
Yeah.
Correct.
Switching focus to that Morse team, a lot of teams in the second half of the season had trouble stopping Austin Balthazar, the runner for them.
Yeah.
He had a 300-yard game according to stats against I think it was Mount Ararat. But you had kind of the answer for him in the first week of the season. You were able to pretty much limit what they did. They only scored 7 points against you. So, what kind of becomes the approach to trying to stop a player like that?
Well, he had a pretty good game, actually. In retrospect, I think he ran for 100 yards, most of them in the first half, because we adjusted and shut him down a little bit. But still, they scored on the opening drive. They ran the ball right down our throat, and that needs to be stopped early. You can't let Balthazar get going. The legs never stop, and once he hits second level, you have to wrap him up at the line of scrimmage. You can't miss tackles with a back like that. We had some big plays on defense that turned that game around. The first game of the season, we got him to fumble, and then we scooped and scored and put him down by a couple touchdowns. And so we need to just play a well-balanced game. That kind of thing needs to happen again on both sides of the ball. Somebody's got to make big plays.
Is he just kind of a downhill runner, just becomes more, tougher and tougher to break down as he gets momentum, or is he kind of a shifty guy, can make guys miss, that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, he runs like you'd want a tailback to run out of a set like that. They run a power I set. Sometimes they'll give him a toss out of the wing, but no, once he gets going downhill, he is tough to stop. Yeah, absolutely. He's explosive.
Okay, should be an interesting game. Couple issues that came up this week in Maine high school sports. One just today in Class A South Portland announced that they will not play their regional quarterfinal game at Bonnie Eagle on Friday night. They cited just a safety issue, Drew, with a lot of players injured. I'm not sure how many healthy bodies they had, but as a 1-7 team anyway, they felt like it's just better to not accept the invitation from the Maine Principal Association to play in the tournament. It's an important distinction to make here. It's not an official forfeit because the MPA playoffs are invitational. This happened a few years ago when Telstar in Class D South elected to not take part in the playoffs. So we've seen this happen with some smaller schools, particularly Orono in Class D North, but this is the first time a bigger school has had this issue come up this year.
That's what's surprising about this and alarming, because it comes on the heels of all those discussions about 8-man football and smaller rosters, and when it's almost like you see it the problems start to creep out more and more and involve more and more teams. Now you see it touching a Class A team where this is supposed to, you think that this is never an issue, but I mean, one of the bigger schools we saw this effect kind of was Greeley, Class B team, but now a Class A team is happening too. I mean, it's more. I think it's the reaction is more just surprising that this is taking place, more than feeling like they should do this or they should do that. I mean, it's when safety is concerned, and you really are wondering if you can field a team of players and safely get through a football team, especially against a much bigger, better team. That's a realistic concern to have. Yeah,
and Coach, it's kind of a surprise with just the tradition South Portland's had there. I know former Gardiner coach John Wolfgram, who had great success at Gardiner, went on to South Portland and built a juggernaut in the 90s. And to see a program like that, slip to this point is unsettling, I would think.
It is. That's, Coach Stinson, I don't know real well. I was at South Portland under Wolfgram almost 20 years ago, trying to learn the craft, and things were good, in the mid 90s and the late 90s with Coach Wolfgram, and there's overall landscape of high school football is changing dramatically all the time, with teams losing numbers and losing teams and things like that, and it's tough. That's tough. I really can't speak to the situation. What's going on down there, I don't know a whole lot about that, but I guess I'll take a couple guys being hurt, versus having to, and playing on Friday versus having to pack it all up and turn in my gear before I even get that chance. So it's very unfortunate for that program.
I mean, as a coach, can you think about if Gardner were ever facing that sort of situation, can you think about what are the steps that you would be? I mean, because it's not like you can just kind of look at the roster and say, not a lot of kids, okay, cancel the game. I mean, this is a really serious or really big decision to make. So, I mean, if you were to put yourself in that position, can you think about the sort of steps that would need to be kind of undertaken in order to make a decision like this?
That's a tough decision to make, and I, certainly would make sure that I talked with staff, coaching staff, first and foremost, administration, just kind of get a look at what it might look like to compete. Again, I don't know their situation down there. If it were me and it were Tiger Town, that would be real tough. I think if you look at the class situation, we could do it with limited numbers, being in C, because a lot of those teams, we didn't even have a freshman team this year, which is somewhat unusual for Gardner. Sure. So we are impacted by it. But I think you're going to play against Bonnie Eagle. It's different if you're going up a strong team like that. You don't want to take any chances, so it's better off, I guess, to be safe. And it's again, that's a real difficult thing to imagine happening to a team, but it is, and I don't have an answer for it.
Yeah, and we have talked about in the past on this show about it's not always the quantity of players, but the quality.
Yeah.
We don't know how many of these kids from South Portland are starters or getting regular rotations, but we do know, like in the past, some schools have made deep playoff runs with under 20 players. So it's just a matter of what you have, I think, more than how many of what you have sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're sending out, X many players, but they all are starters and they've been playing for a while and they know the system, they know the game, or you can send out that many plus 6 or 7 players, but now you're starting to talk about kids who have never seen action, kids who don't know how to, really don't know how to take a hit and all that stuff. It becomes you have more numbers, but it becomes a completely different prospect.
Absolutely. I can't help but think of a story I heard from defensive coordinator Pat Munzing was telling me about. I think it was his junior year in '97 at Gardiner, and they went to states, and they took one bus to the state championship game. They played a game the week before in snow. And, there were probably 5 kids on the sideline. There were probably more heaters on the sideline than extra bodies. And, Bangor used to have 100 kids on the sideline. Times have changed, and you just have to try to adapt.
Yeah, it would be a tough situation to put a couple freshmen into their first varsity game and have it a playoff game at Bonnie Eagle. That's not fair to anybody, I would think.
Yeah, and again, I think it depends on the levels, too, because Mike Hathaway's put freshmen out there a couple of years ago when they were playing a Class B schedule, and, boy, they made playoffs with they might have been 2-7. They might have had 1 win, and there were 4 or 5 freshmen playing against Kennebunk.
Sure.
And so, yeah, you can have the people and low numbers, but at the same time, it's just tough if you don't have much to go up against a team like Bonnie Eagle in South Portland's case. So
yeah,
I mean, the other thing that's tough is just the opposite perspective. Is Bonnie Eagle gets, I mean, they get a win out of this and move on to the next round.
Yeah,
right?
they're on to Scarborough.
Yeah,
now.
so I mean that's one less game where they have to deal with potential injuries,
Extra week to prepare,
or an extra week to prepare, an extra week to not worry about guys getting beat up and stuff like that. So it's not just as simple as South Portland's probably going to lose the game anyway. So the world keeps spinning. There are some ramifications that will have a play next week or two.
And there's kids that want to play football that don't get a chance to play this week.
Yeah, if you're a senior, that's it.
I mean, I'd be pretty upset about that.
Yeah,
right. Another issue that's come up this week is field conditions. I guess it's always been an issue, but it seems like more and more schools are being proactive about doing something about it or moving games. For instance, this week, Coney has announced that when they host a Pine Tree Conference Class B game next week, it will not be at Coney High School. It'll be at Lewiston, where they have new field turf, and field conditions won't be an issue. Drew, we've seen some pretty chewed-up fields in the past, and it looks like teams just would rather not play on those if there's another option.
Yeah, I mean, I think with football, it probably takes a lot to consider grounds unsuitable, because that's kind of one of the things about football. It's a bad track just means it's just going to be a muddy, sloppy game. Who doesn't like that? But when it's a field like, I saw pictures of how Alumni Field is looking up there, and you're seeing standing water, you're seeing puddles in the field, and that's just that is now you're getting into safety. I mean, that's not just an aesthetic thing; it's safety. And that field was in rough shape for the game for the game that you guys played up there. There was
mess.
You had people dropping snaps and slipping and everything like that. So, I mean, is there kind of a line that you think where it's like between a field being just tough conditions and bad can't play on this kind of thing?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to have to make the decision. I guess it'd be like a superintendent having to call a snow day or a 2-hour delay.
Yeah,
right.
But if you're using common sense and you go out and you check the field weekly, there's a lot of factors involved. How much use is the field getting? I mean, Hoke Field is all torn up from soccer games and even from last spring with lacrosse, playing on it. And if it's not well maintained, it's getting a lot of use. It's really hard. This time of year, we get a lot of rain and the fields get a lot of use. And unless you've got that field turf, it's
I
tough.
remember covering a game at Hoke in 2006, Winslow at Gardiner in the regional final, and it was literally just chunks of sod everywhere. It was
You're standing in mud
Yeah.
on the sideline, and you can't even see where the lines are, and it's so safety becomes an issue, but ultimately, what's it going to take for the field to recover from it? I don't know. End of the season, give it the winter, but again, some schools pick right up in the spring and do everything on those surfaces. So
it can't be an easy, like you said, it's not an easy decision to give up the gate of a home playoff game and have to pay to go to Lewiston, 30 miles away. And
yeah, I mean that's part of the great thing about getting a top 2 seed. Is,
you played all season for that.
And
now you're not.
You get to be in your field in front of your fans. I mean, they're probably going to get a good showing in Lewiston, but you don't know. I mean, you don't know how well that's going to travel. So, but it was. The funny thing is that things kind of shook out in Coney's favor in order for the field to be ready by these games. I mean, they didn't have to. They play the last game of the regular season on the road. They didn't have to play this round, so they don't. That's another week that there's not a game there. I mean, I remember Paul Vachon at a field hockey game talking about it, saying that he felt pretty good about it if they got that bye, that the field would be ready to go. And just with the weather and everything,
more rain.
I mean, again, those pictures I saw made it look like. Yeah, you couldn't have a game there.
We're fortunate now that schools have options, like the new field at Lewiston.
Yep.
Messalonski's going to have turf next year. Colby College. So there's a lot of it in Central Maine where teams don't have to travel, all the way to Portland or the Bangor area.
And I wonder if this is going to lead a talk about turf at Coney. I mean, I don't. That's
It very well could.
That's a long process. That's not just as simple as saying, "Let's get a turf field." Okay, and then one's in 3 months. It's.
Well, we saw at Messalonski this year. They played no home games. They played 3 of their home games at Colby, and the 4th was a home game at Waterville against Waterville, where they were basically the road team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we've ever talked about that with BL here, but I got to think that he wouldn't object to playing on a turf field.
Style of offense Coney likes, where they
he'd probably like a faster track.
Yeah, I'm sure they would appreciate it. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's look at some of these playoff games that we have this week, and we'll stay in the Pine Tree Conference Class B with Mount Blue at Lawrence. It's a rematch of a Week 1 game. That one was played at Farmington at Mount Blue. This one's going to be at Lawrence's Keyes Field in Fairfield. Mount Blue kind of surprised the whole league in that Week 1 game with a 34-13 win over Lawrence. Lawrence had a couple guys hurt, had a key player, Isaiah Schooler, ejected in the first quarter. And it just kind of got away from him, and that kind of gave Mount Blue a springboard to a successful season, and they're in the playoffs for the first time in a couple seasons.
Yeah, and it's sometimes it feels like a high school season is over in a second, and sometimes it feels like a lot can happen over the course of a season. Like it seems like at the beginning of the season we were looking at Mount Blue as don't sleep on them, and in the middle of the season they're an automatic. You play at Mount Blue, that's an automatic win, and now here we are at the end of the season. They're right back to being a tough matchup again. Yeah. I mean, getting that, they got the big win against Skowhegan.
They lost to Skowhegan by a point.
The close battle with Skowhegan. So, they're back to being again that team that can give pretty much anybody they play a tough go. So it's especially when you consider how that first matchup went. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see if Mount Blue just has Lawrence figured out, or if Lawrence just has a lot more going for it this time around.
Yeah, and Lawrence has kind of changed some things offensively. Alex Higgins was a new fullback at the beginning of the season, has kind of grown into the role, had a couple back-to-back 100-yard games. So it'll be interesting. Nobody likes going to Keyes Field in late October or November. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if you ever had a chance to play there or coach there, but the fans are right on top of you. It's loud. And,
yes, it surely is.
Yeah. It can be a treat.
Yeah.
All right, in Class D South, we have a few games, and that was a league that was so close all season long. Mm-hmm. Looks like each of these games, Drew, is a pick 'em. We'll start with Winthrop, Monmouth, Halldale going to Spruce Mountain.
Yeah, and that's somebody might say, well, that's kind of weird to be thinking of that as a pick 'em after Spruce won the opener 38-6, but a lot has changed since then. One thing is that Winthrop, Monmouth, Halldale has figured out its running game. They moved Jevin Smith from tight end to running back, and it's just been a night and day difference. They're able to. Coach St. Hilaire was saying every 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 was an adventure at the beginning of the season. He said they weren't even able to get that surge up front, and now they're able to pick those up, and they're able to get 60, 70 yards on and averaging 6-7 yards a pop from Smith, and it's made a much more well-rounded attack. We knew what they had in quarterback with Keegan Choate, and now they're able to get the production on the ground as well. So Spruce will have their hands full. I mean, it might be a lot to wonder if 38-6 can swap, but
True.
No, this should be And also the way Winthrop Monmouth Halldale has played the whole season. They've started to look like a team that can give a challenge to anybody it goes up against.
Yeah. Another game in that league, Oak Hill is going to Lisbon.
Yeah, and again, you look at the scoring from just last week, and you see Lisbon 47, Oak Hill 27. Now, it should be an easy game, but that was a battle into the fourth until Oak Hill started to kind of try to press the issue on offense through some picks and that ended the game. But Oak Hill has also been that team that's just they hang around in all the games they play. They don't get blown off the field too often. So, but what they have to do is they have to stop Isaiah Thompson. He ran 3 touchdowns, 168 yards on the ground against Oak Hill in the last game. They need to contain that, and that's probably sounds pretty obvious.
It's easy for us to say.
Yeah. But I mean, you probably don't need to stop it, but you just need to make sure you got to make them work. And Coach, I would think you probably have the same take on it. You got to hold a team to make them string together these drives rather than giving up chunks of yardage and just making it.
Yeah, we're looking at this week with Baltazar kid in the backfield for Morse. You better choke that down and make them earn every yard, because if you let that kid break loose and make big plays, it's going to be a long night.
Yeah, because if a guy's getting 4, 5, 6 yards a carry, you might look at that and say, well, if you're handing to him all the time, you're going to pick up first downs and score each time. But I would think, when you hit home those shorter runs, you force them to try to do a few more things to move the ball, pass the ball a little more, maybe do some things they're not comfortable doing, versus if they're able to rip off those long runs. It takes the game right out of your hands.
Right. Another game in that conference this weekend is Madison at Mountain Valley. This was a Mountain Valley win by 6 points just a few weeks ago, 26-20. It was one of 3 games in a row from Madison that was decided by a touchdown or less, lose to Mountain Valley by 6, then go beat Winthrop Monmouth Halldale by a touchdown, and then lose to Spruce Mountain by a touchdown. The interesting thing about the rematch with Mountain Valley is if you're Madison, you feel like if we just play a little tighter on special teams, we can win this game. Mm-hmm. They gave up 2 kick returns for touchdowns in the second half, lose the game by a touchdown, that's it. I imagine, Coach, have you ever had a game where you can look at film and go, like, if we just do like 1 or 2 little things, this game's ours.
Right. Not get holding penalties.
Right.
Yeah, sure. Again, I go back to our game with Morris initially. That we don't get that scoop and score. Blaze Tripp doesn't take that to the house. You got a tight game. It can shift things one way or the other. A big play. The kick return is the worst. They didn't even have to run a play, and they're taking it to you. But to have it happen twice is tough. Big plays. Yeah, I mean that's the difference, and depending on the timing of what's going on in the game, if it's close and somebody opens up a couple of big ones on you, and you had to fight to just put 1 or 2 up, it can be a tough way.
You're
to turn
feeling
it around.
good about yourself. You put together a good scoring drive, but then immediately momentum swings back on a one play like that.
Yeah.
It's got to be frustrating, to say the least.
It reminds me of what Jake Rogers, the Nokomis coach, was saying. Was it last week that we were talking to him, and he said it's tough to beat when you get 2 teams that are pretty evenly matched. It's tough to beat that team twice in a season. Sometimes the rematch favors the team that lost, so we'll see if that plays out.
Yeah. Moving on to Class C North, speaking of Nokomis, they are hosting a playoff game for the 2nd year in a row, so it's nice to see development for that program, hosting Madomic Valley in the 5 versus 4 game.
Yeah, I mean that's this is one where you don't have that regular season matchup to go off of to gauge how they might go up against each other. But I mean, it's just the continuation of a good trend for Nokomis getting these home games.
And they're coming off a week where they took a very good MCI team to overtime. They were down 21-0 in the first half, came back and tied it late, 21-21. Gave up a field goal on the first drive of overtime, then had an unfortunate turnover, and that was the game. But Nokomis, in their 4 losses, never really got blown out. They played all these good teams very tough. You wonder, they're just maybe 1 or 2 plays, like we're talking about, from turning one of those games into a win.
And you'll wonder if that experience from last postseason, granted it was only 1 game, but if that experience from being in a playoff chase now 2 years in a row, making playoffs 2 years in a row, if they're just going to be a little more ready for that stage.
Yeah. Another game in that conference is Waterville at Winslow. That game's going to be at 11 a.m. Saturday morning now. They moved it up from 1 o'clock to beat the weather that's coming in on Saturday afternoon. Another, like your game with Morris, these teams know each other. This is their fourth game in 2 years. I think it's the fifth or sixth time they've played in the playoffs against each other since 2005. So these schools are separated by, I think, 3 red lights and a mile and a half. The last couple games have been decidedly Winslow, but it's a rivalry game, and I wouldn't count Waterville out.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to start fast. They've got to start fast. They've got to get Winslow behind because that's.
They did that in the regular season.
Yeah, I mean,
and it didn't
to an
work
extent.
out.
I mean, yeah, they scored first, but it was also by the end of the first quarter, the game was out of hand in Winslow's favor.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's got to be a fast start, but it's got to be a sustained fast start, and it's got to. You got to kind of get that feeling for both sides, like we're in for a tough game here, rather than Winslow gets off, boom, 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 they're up 21-0 or 21-7, and that feeling starts to sink in on the Waterville sideline. Here we go again, especially being on the same field.
And you, Coach, know, like we talked about Lawrence earlier, Pool and Field and Winslow is a tough place to go.
It is a tough place to play. You just, you can't take anything for granted. You can't get complacent if you're up. Waterville, Winslow, decent matchup. Winslow's tough. They're going to fight you for 4 quarters. Mm-hmm. If you get up on them, don't take your foot off the pedal because, and it's the same thing with anybody playing Nokomis right now. I mean, that's one of those things. They've played everybody tough in the regular season. It's not somebody necessarily want to open up with, in the playoffs or have to face in the semis or quarterfinals because they're tough and they scrap and don't give up.
Yeah, nobody wants to look too far ahead, but if they were to win that game and number 1 MCI knocks off number 8 Belfast, that's the rematch in the semifinals, and I'm sure in the back of their minds each team will be saying, "Oh no, we're looking 1 week at a time," but they're thinking of the other. That's another 2 teams that have become rivals. One exit separates them on I-95, and they call it a crosstown rivalry, even though the towns are neighbors. So.
Yeah, that's you got to think when there's that much, online in terms of familiarity, in terms of how close the teams are and everything. Those thoughts definitely start to seep through. It's tough to look at it as just another game.
Right. Okay, that's going to do it for us this week. Come back next week. We'll be talking about regional semifinals. For Drew, for Coach, I'm Travis. Thanks for joining us on Gridiron Gurus.